The French Revolution. The leading figures of the French Revolution stand out in European history as the defenders of liberty, equality, and democratic ideals. The revolution was a movement of violent government reform. It ended the absolute rule by French kings and gave power and inspiration to the middle class. Its history begins in 1789 with the rule of King Louis XVI and follows the efforts and influences of philosophical and political leaders. The revolution came to an end in 1799 when French General Napoleon Bonaparte seized control of the government. The years preceding the French Revolution were times of social unrest and economic crisis. After financing and fighting in the 7 Years' War and the American Revolutionary War, France was deeply in debt. With the intention of raising taxes, King Louis called a meeting of the Estates General. The Estates General was a representative body whose members came from all three social classes called estates. The first two estates consisted of the clergy and nobles. Peasants, laborers, and the merchant middle class comprised the third estate. This third estate was solely responsible for providing France's entire tax revenue. Its representatives thus entered the meeting of the Estates General harboring much discontent. Their proposals for voting reforms and equal representation were refused by the king and the first two estates, sparking the formation of the National Assembly by the representatives of the third estate. The National Assembly vowed not to disband until they had written a national constitution for France. They based the format of their constitution in part on the ideals of French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who had previously suggested that the right to govern comes from the people. Meanwhile, the Parisian masses stormed the Bastille prison. Their goal was to capture arms and ammunition to defend themselves against the king's army. In the countryside, peasants initiated uprisings against the nobility. Many nobles fled the country. With the final drafting of a new constitution and the redistribution of government powers in 1791, the National Assembly stepped down. A newly elected Legislative Assembly assumed control of France in cooperation with the king. Louis, however, refused to accept this new branch of government, which was comprised primarily of representatives of the middle class. Consequently, the people of Paris imprisoned Louis and his family and later had them executed. France was declared a republic. The National Convention headed the nation under the principles of democracy and the slogan Liberty, Equality, Fraternity. Radical leaders, including Maximilien Robespierre, Georges-Jacques Danton, and Jean-Paul Marat, soon rose to prominence in the convention. They formed a powerful political group called the Jacobin Club. Disputes between this group and other members of the convention led to a struggle for power. The Jacobins won. The Jacobin government, led by Robespierre, instigated a policy of terror toward anyone who rebelled against or disagreed with its rulers. During this reign of terror, hundreds of thousands of suspects were jailed. The courts handed down over 18,000 death sentences. Despite its dictatorial practices, the Jacobin government nevertheless carried out democratic reforms. Such reforms included the provision of free primary education and the collection of taxes based on income. Robespierre's enemies in the convention captured and executed him in 1794, thus ending the reign of terror. Members of the convention established a new democracy under a 5-man executive directory that ruled along with a 2-house legislature. The new government, called the Directory, adopted a new constitution. It re-established France as a republic. The supposedly democratic constitution, however, still held stipulations on voting rights. The Directory faced the challenges of war, economic instability, and rebellions. In 1799, several political leaders, organized by General Napoleon Bonaparte, seized control of the government. After years of bloody internal conflict, the revolution had come to an end. The French Revolution left the people of France discouraged over the long-lasting political conflict. They had failed to form a general consensus about the best method of governing their country. Nevertheless, the revolution influenced the spread of democratic ideals across much of Western Europe. It also established the foundations for a strongly unified French state, an effective central government, and political freedom for the middle and land-owning classes.